Today's episode of Into the Van is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you can always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co. And be sure to add our podcast Into the Van in How Did You Hear About Podgo section of the application.
Rogue Radio, where rogues come to hang, with Alex Tempest and Bob Lothian bringing you the best in classic and modern country music.
Hey guys, welcome to Into the Van. Today's episode is brought to you by Rogue Radio, the brand new show from Rogue Country. It plays all the best of classic and modern artists. So you have Buck Owens, George Jones, Waylon Jennings, Hank Williams, right next to amazing modern artists like Sarah Vista, Amelia Quinn, Kings and Queens, Rob Henry. You know, this is a truly all-encompassing show that just shows how great this style of music is. And when people say there's no good music anymore, you can point them to this show, which is now available on Mixcloud at mixcloud.com/Rogue Country. And as always, this episode is of course brought to you by The Next Life. That is my debut album, which is out now. It's 9 tracks of alt country joy. I'm super proud of this album and everything it's achieved so far, and I just want to get as many ears as possible to it. I'm going to drop a quick clip for you now.
I've done, say a father to son, and let this worldly view grow. Do what you can and love what you do, for it's a long and lonely road. It's a long and lonely road. It's a long and lonely road.
And that is one of the tracks off The Next Life that I really hope you enjoy. It's on vinyl, it's on CD, it's digital, it's on all streaming platforms, and all you need to do is go to mike333west.com and you'll be able to find it there. Today's episode of Into the Van is someone I really think you're going to love. For me, this was a phenomenal conversation, and I was so happy that he agreed to say yes. This is, of course, the incredible Beans on Toast. I've been a fan of this guy since I saw him opening for Flogging Molly way back when, and his career is such an interesting and inspiring, it takes all these twists and turns that I think people really need to hear. And if you're an aspiring musician who just needs to realize you need to grind out this game, there's no one better than Beans to tell you that. We have a great talk about songwriting, keeping things, that you have to talk about. Like, there's a lot of issues where people say shut up and sing, and you can't talk about political issues, and I always think of Beans on Toast when I think about that argument. He influenced me for my songs like Nuke Song. He's influenced my point of view when I've said things on stage that I know people might not necessarily agree with, and he's just an all-around great independent musician to learn from. And, he's really such a nice, down-to-earth bloke as well that I can't believe he actually agreed to do this. So I'm absolutely amazed that I got to sit down with Beans for, an hour and talk about songwriting and stuff. And if you're a fan of this episode, I don't know if you're here for the first time because of Beans on Toast, and if you are, welcome. But we have so many great guests in previous episodes, so please feel free to do a deep dive on those episodes as well. This is an absolutely phenomenal conversation. I don't want to keep you too much, so let's get down to it, guys. This is episode 14 of Into the Van with Mike West and Beans on Toast. Welcome to Into the Van with me, Mike West. Cool, so we're rolling. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just talking about gems on VHS. Is there anyone you're listening to at the moment, or anyone who's jumped out on your travels that you've been listening to?
well, there's a new Bright Eyes album out last week, so I've been going through that. Big Bright Eyes fan, but I mean, I've been listening to a lot of music during, this year more than ever. I think. But a lot of country stuff. A chap called Gabe Lee is really good. Tyler Childers and Casper Allen, who's my favourite from the kind of Gems on VHS lot. His sort of long-awaited album came out. I'd only really heard his stuff off that YouTube channel. He had nothing online at all. His album was out week before last. So yeah,
it's a really weird. I don't know if it's a trend or it's just by what happens, but it seems to be all these people who have been on Gems and that Western AF channel. They seem to only really have that 1 or 2 videos out. Then you try and find them on Facebook, and it's like 300 likes or something, and you're like, how the fuck have these people not been either not just discovered yet, but how do they not have that presence? Yeah, but it shows just how underground these singer-songwriters are at the moment.
Yeah, maybe they've spent their time working on their songs rather than their social media activity. Certainly sounds like it.
Yeah, definitely. But what I wanted to talk to you was before, obviously, when you agreed to do this, I got dead excited. So I went back and listened to your chat with Scroobius Pip on the Distraction Pieces, which was a couple of years ago now.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about, you said you were brought up on some of that older country stuff. What type of things were you listening to when you were younger? Like
on the country aspect, I mean, I had my sort of musical youth was a mixture between my mum, who was like the kind of the Beatle maniac, and she pretty much listened to nothing but Beatles or Beatles affiliated stuff, and my dad, who was a big country fan basically. And it was the 80s, so our favorite act was Randy Travis, probably. So it was like proper cheesy. We wasn't really Garth Brooks fans in our house, but it was sort of that ilk, like 80s big snare drum stuff like that. But then at the same time there was John Prine, Guy Clark, and the kind of the songwriting greats of country. But probably our sort of like the modern country of the 80s, probably a time that has sort of been forgotten for a reason, I would imagine. Even Johnny Cash went shit in the 80s.
It is a really weird like period of time, because it just seems that like even it only really seems like glam metal and like Bon Jovi kind of survived the 80s well. And it just
all the 80s bands, all the kind of new romantics and stuff that was, I think it was like there was a lot of new technology on hand. And if you was kind of doing country music, you just applied the technology to that, thinking that, well, this is exciting, because no one had really heard it before. So stuff like that didn't date well, but didn't age well, sorry. But, there was plenty of great music that came out of the 80s at the same time.
It seems the 80s for me, just because obviously I was born in the 90s, so I have no idea what I'm talking about really. But it seems to me that
I was born in 1980, so me up until I was 10 years old.
But it seems that a lot of the great 80s bands were the ones who kind of were formed and broke in that decade, and everyone before then had an adjustment period, like you were saying. It was like the technology, and it was really that, I think, was the biggest period of change, I think, for music up until that point.
I guess because there was so many kind of like recording breakthroughs about what equipment was available, basically. I'd put it like that. But who knows?
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to, with that kind of upbringing on country and, with the Beatles, and I just saw a thing today, and I don't know if you'll agree with it. If the Beatles are so great, how come they aren't on the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 soundtrack?
I'm sure they are.
Apparently the internet says they're not, but with that but with that kind of background, has that been an influence on your writing and things? I know it's very folk and story.
I don't really say it in public, but I'd like to think of myself as a country songwriter. I'm more often called folk, but it took me, a bit of sort of looking back and soul searching to realize that, I was writing, when I started writing the songs that are now performed as Beans on Toast, it was like, there's songs with country songs. I mean, there's a lot of songs about drinking and, getting fucked up, There's also, with country songs, you know what the songs are about. It's not like sort of beautiful poetry painting a picture of, or imagery or anything like that. It's like, this is a song about this one particular thing. It's whether it be about my wife leaving me or me climbing a mountain or this other bit. It's like they're very sort of like to the point, which is exactly what I do with my songwriting. And it wasn't something didn't think about that or set out to do it, but it was, in hindsight, comparing my songs to anyone, it was like, well, it makes, I basically do that, in my songs are about specific things that are very clear what the specifics are, rather than, like I said, sort of like hinting at an idea or sort of like trying to portray my emotions with poetic language.
I think, especially listening to your kind of stuff, there is that, not that there's no like pretense or anything, but it's very to the point, and that's what country and that kind of folk stuff is. But what I think, and this isn't me just like complimenting you and you come on here for an hour and I just tell you all the things that I'm a fan of.
All right.
But what I think you do better than almost anyone out there at the moment is the same thing that made the original kind of folk and country movement back in the day so great, like with Woody Guthrie, where you talk about the things that are affecting you from your perspective at that time. So it can be dated or kind of put, so like the song 2016, that can kind of have a focal point and a date of that year, but it's still applicable and you can still listen back to it in the same way that you can listen to what Woody Guthrie was singing about looking around at his time. And I think that may be an element that's kind of missing from modern day country and folk.
Yeah, I mean, singing about social commentary, which is something I've always done, it does give songs a shelf life. Certainly, I mean, maybe not. I'm glad that you say that you can still listen back to 2016. I can't really play it live anymore. I sort of, when I wrote it in June, I only had 6 months of a live life, really. Because it was, I wrote it in June and it was like, come January, I knew I'm not going to, it just feels like looking backwards. And I think that goes, and a lot of, writing about the pandemic, like if the world, the more I've written about social commentary and the longer I've been doing this, the harder it's been to keep up. I've always released a lot of music, written constantly and released a lot of music. And even last year, writing about Brexit, and writing a song in July or August that was out of date and, actually wrong by December when it came out, because things had changed so much. That sort of says a lot about how the world is kind of was speeding up. Yeah. And again, writing about the pandemic, I was writing about something and getting it out within a matter of 2 weeks, and sometimes it felt out of date, because the world's moving that fast. And I think if you're gonna write about current events, you need to understand that the song will have a shelf life, and that goes hand in hand with why I release so much music, basically. And I don't necessarily think that makes the songs kind of throwaway. It's just, but to a certain extent, some of mine are. Like there's a whole bunch in my back catalogue that I'll never play again. I don't even know, I wouldn't remember the words or the chords to, like the just sort of like mattered for that time then. But then I'll move on quite quickly without, I love my songs, but I'm certainly not fucking precious about them.
I think that's a really interesting thing about you, because I know that especially with like the bigger bands like Metallica and stuff, there can be this almost like sterile feel to them, because they're going to be playing X amount of songs, they're going to be playing Enter Sandman at the end, when certain songs are going to come up in the set. But with you, are you more conscious of when you write a set list and do a show, it's like, well, I've written this song and it's got like 2 weeks, so I need to play this at as many shows before then as possible?
I mean, I don't put that much thought in. I don't really use set lists. I mean, but I'll always play MD Amazing at every gig, because there's some people that just want to hear that song, and that's, I'm completely cool with that. So there's, 2 or 3 songs of that first record, which is, over 10 years old, that I will generally play, or certainly if someone shouts them out, I'll play it. But at the same time, whatever song I've just finished will always get an airing. I mean, I struggle to. This year's been a bit different because there's been so few gigs, but I struggle to not play my songs before they're finished. Like, if I'm just about to finish a song and I've got a gig, I'll say to myself, don't play the fucking song, just don't do it. Just wait till you finished it and then you gig it. And then like halfway through the gig, I'm like, all right, who wants to hear a new song? It's not actually done, but I'll just, and sometimes that helps me kind of find out where the song's supposed to end or whatnot. But yeah, it almost feels kind of redundant comparing what I do to what Metallica do. It's obviously, we're on completely, different ends of the kind of spectrum of what people want. But yeah, I'll always, I'll definitely play what people want to hear rather than just being like, these are the new 5. I wouldn't open with 3 or 4 songs that I've just written. But I generally like opening with a brand new tune. I've got no qualms with that. And so I think that comes from, if I'm working on a song or I've just finished a song, that's at the forefront of my head. And since I step on stage, it's just like, I kind of need to, I'll never remember it if I play it halfway through the gig. So it's like, get up there, get that out, because it's still in this sort of fragile memory place. Get that out and then just sort of relax into the rest of the gig.
Yeah. I've been kicking around this thought, and I don't know, I think you're probably one of the best people to talk to about, is with, what I was just saying about kind of like designated set lists and things. Obviously you don't use one. I've been thinking of, do you like the stand-up comedy model, especially George Carlin, where he'd, perform on tour doing this material, and then once he recorded it and it was actually like documented, he'd burn that entire hour of material and then have to write something new. I was wondering if a musician taking that approach would help creatively more and actually create a more interesting live show and more interesting songs if they then, after recording an album, stopped performing those songs to a point.
I don't think so. I mean, I love I love George Carlin. And that's a great idea. It's kind of it's incredibly creative things to do. But I think the reality of what people go to a gig for is they want to hear the songs that they love, ideally as close to the recording as possible, really, because that song means something to them in life and they want to feel them emotions, which so kind of it feels like you kind of robbing people of an experience a little bit, didn't it? I mean, with the kind of comedian thing, I remember like I can be repetitive, on tours, because I talk a lot in between my songs, and on tours I can basically be telling the same gags, and there's something about it which feels a little rude. Like if you're, if you're telling the same joke night after night in between songs, or introducing the song in the same manner, there was a part of me that was like, because it feels spontaneous, but like ultimately it's kind of scripted, and it doesn't feel or look it. And I was like in my head, sort of wrestling with that thought: am I, sort of mistreating the audience in any way? And I was with a good friend of mine who actually is called Mike West, who's an American guy from a band called Truck Stop Honeymoon, who and he's a big storyteller on stage as well. And we toured together, and he, again, he sort of runs through his kind of script, and he sort of compared that to comedians. He was like, the thing is about musicians, people do want to hear the songs that they know, and they want to hear them in a way that that is familiar to them. And telling some jokes in between is nothing in comparison to, a stand-up comedian that ultimately doesn't, no one wants to hear the same joke twice. Like, people do want to hear that fresh, and they're ultimately touring, doing the same jokes every night, bang, 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 and making it feel spontaneous. And once he sort of mentioned that, I was like, he's right. There is, and it is still, I mean, it's never scripted, my gigs, but there's just, like the same old story comes out. But once I kind of got my head around that bit, I felt a little bit more at ease.
Yeah. I've been kicking that idea around. I don't think I'd ever have the balls to do it, because I enjoy playing the songs I playing the ones I've written, and I like each song. I don't like with like if you have the same thing, if it's in a different venue, or it can just be one thing that changes it, and it even just changes the meaning for you as you play it. And I like discovering that type of like perspective on a song that I've been so familiar with to still get taken by surprise when I'm playing it.
Fuck yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think they, you know, songs have their own lives, and the longer that you play them, the more you find out about them. I mean, I never really listen, unless I really can't remember a song, I never listen back to how they were recorded. And the odd time that, you know, someone else puts it on or whatever, I'm always surprised by the fact that it's too slow or the words are wrong on the record or whatever, you know, because it's now sort of adapted and lived on, and, you know, and exists in a different way.
And with,
I think that's the strength of the song. If you find it, you know, new meanings in your own songs in years after you've written them, then, you know, hats off to you.
yeah, I think there's a few songs that are like personal, and I know sometimes it's like I don't. So even if I'm not in a bad mood, but I'm in a different frame of mind when I'm playing them, it just I either deliver it differently, or it's just it registers my performance differently. It's just something I enjoy, because as much as it's like a live experience for the crowd, it's a live experience for me as well, because I'm still playing, and it's still, you know, if I flub a note or something, it's like it's something new for me to engage with and interact. That's what I really love about playing live performances and going to see them.
Yeah, well, I did a seated tour for my book that came out a couple of years ago, and I played the odd seated show around, over the years, but this was specifically in seated venues, theatres, and stuff like that. And it was like unbelievable how effectively I was doing the same old shit that I always do, but I was sat down and everyone else was sat down, and it's incredible how different it felt. Like it was, it just felt like a completely different gig than, you know, my gigs are always quite rowdy. I've got no qualms with people chatting and kind of, you know, like there being, you know, the rooms being quite sort of vibrant, and then sat everybody down on some people's. I found it, I mean, I loved it, but I felt it was really self-indulgent, like too much, like, and I worried that everybody needed the toilet all the time, you know, as I would, you know, in that scenario, like nervous to stand up and go for a piss. So I'd actually do, during the seated gig, that worried me so much, I did scheduled piss break halfway through every night where I went for a piss, and everybody, just because I was just worried about the tension in the room. But it was so, you know, and again, the songs, which were the same songs, it wasn't like I was playing them slower or more gentler or anything like that. I was just sat down, and they took on a whole new life. But I don't know whether that's the power of the song or the power of, you know, sort of like the room and mentality of people between standing up and sitting down.
It's such an interesting thing. I know it is with people even sitting up or standing down. It can completely change the like vibrance of the room and stuff. But with your songs, like, do you have a process, especially with the like commentary songs and the ones that are quite current? Do you have a process with that? Because I assume it has to have a quick turnaround time. So what is like a process for a recent song like?
For writing? I mean, I've sort of, my writing has always been the same. As long as I'm in a room where I feel like no one can hear me. And so privacy, I guess. Just privacy and weed, basically. Smoke a couple of cigarettes and just sit. I feel like I would never sit at home and play my old songs or rehearse, and I don't really know how to play other people's songs on guitar, like maybe a few John Prine songs, but I wouldn't really sit around and do that. So when I get a chance to play guitar, you know, I generally play something new and write something, and I almost find that I don't do it. And again, this is talking like pre-lockdown, because things, you know, it's changed so much. But normally I sort of wouldn't have that privacy just because I'm so busy doing something else. It'd sort of build up, and I'd almost be like fully charged, like not being able to sit down and write, and just, you know, like thinking loads of things, and then I'll just like have one night and I'll sort of write the bare bones of like 2 or 3 songs, and then once like there's basically it's a two process thing, whereas like I write the most of it and then it just goes around and round in my head for the next couple of days where it gets ironed out, and then just record it onto my phone or whatever, and then it's done. And I find my favorite songs are write about pen and paper. I find you can just like I memorize songs as I write them, so the good ones that that just roll off the tongue, and then I'll just go round and round and round, like I said, come back, it'll be done. I never like it's full moon tonight, isn't it? Like, I always like I like writing around like lunar cycles as well. Like, I found it sort of it sort of caught me out a few times. Like I'd sort of be like just finishing. I'd been having a great night, like again, like sort of deep in the middle of this song, and then I'd go outside and it'd be like, "Fuck, there's a full moon." And it caught me a few times that I sort of, and I've always had a bit of a thing for the moon and shit like that, but like because of that, I sort of started paying more attention to it, and as usual with them things, the more you sort of tune into it. So. And again, like now that I've just, for this year, I've had so much time at home, I was sitting where it's like full moon tomorrow, and purposely, like get a guitar out and sort of go then. But yeah, that's, if there is a process, is that. But I think at the same time, I'm always writing. So that is the process, really.
And with stuff like 2016, was there an initial line or anything, if you can remember, that was the first kind of building block for that song, or something that kicked it off?
I think the kind of songs come because going back to the kind of country thing where it's like the songs being definitely about something. I think the song is almost written the minute that I have the idea. It's like, that'll be and out on the piss, I'm a nightmare because someone says, well, someone makes a comment about something and I'm like, oh, that'll be a song. You can write a song about that. And I sort of see songs everywhere. Like in what people say and things that happen. It's like, oh, I could do a song about that, blah, blah. So it's like constantly like that. And some of them stick and some of them don't. I sometimes wake up in the morning knowing that I had a good idea. There was something I talk about. I can't remember for the life of me what it was. But I think once it's like what comes is the concept, and turning the concept into, a 3-chord ditty is I don't want to say easy, but yeah, I find it quite easy. In fact, it's more than easy, really hugely enjoyable is what I'd say. I really, really enjoy the process. I see it as a kind of magic as well. It's just like creating something out of nothing. And that can effectively be so powerful, for me and potentially for other people as well. But the amount of kind of distance that I've travelled off of my songs, which is that have come out of absolute thin air, never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, I kind of believe, like, I'm not Buddhist, but I enjoy their text. And there's a guy called Thich Nhat Hanh who wrote No Death, No Fear. And it's a really good book that helped me, like, kind of wrap my head around, like, existential crisis. I had, like, a massive fear of death and stuff, but this is going to go lighter. And it's, I was having these, like, thoughts. So I was reading this book, and it talks about how something can't come from nothing and nothing can't come from something. And I kind of thought with songwriting, that's the kind of same thing. And I think talking to yourself and talking to other songwriters, it's like, it's kind of pulled out of thin air, but it's everything. And it's like, even if it's like a lunar cycle, everything kind of has to line up for this song to manifest itself from, this snippet of a conversation you had to remembering that a chord might fit somewhere, and it all kind of funnels down. And then you have this like just moment of clarity where this song forms. And I think, again, it's such an enjoyable and indescribable feeling. I think if you haven't written songs, and I've been speaking to a lot of my friends who are musicians, and they in lockdown have been putting pressure on themselves to write and stuff. And I'm like, are you having fun though? And if they say no, I'm like, then don't play your guitar, don't write a song. You have to be enjoying what you're doing to get.
Yeah, I think there's an art into being able to open the door to the art, basically, and it goes across the board in you know, getting in there, you know, as much as, because I've got no problem with, you know, writing a song to a deadline or anything like that, but it's mainly because I've been doing it for so long. I don't feel that, oh, nothing's going to come sort of thing, you know. But I think the mindset of any creative outlet is hugely important, you know, because you need to, I don't know, it's a mixture of kind of, yeah, feeling sort of confident but not pressured, basically, and, you know, and honest. And, well, I mean, you know, I think the world could all do with feeling a bit less pressured and a bit more confident. But yeah, I've always just really loved it. I think that, and there's, you know, there's a kind of joy that comes with, you know, knowing that you've written a song that you really like as well, that will, you know, keep me floating around for days, you know, like with the song just in my head, and just, you know, knowing that I got another one.
Yeah, and that's probably why when you play it live, it's like you need to get it out straight away to kind of be like, look what I've got, and try and like, because you are excited about it and you want to show people.
Exactly that.
But I first met you at a Flog and Molly gig. I can't even remember the year of it now. It was in the Manchester Academy too, so I think it may have been 2013 or so.
Yeah.
But when did you start as a solo act, or as, you know, Beans on Toast?
My first album came out in 2009, and I reckon I was playing for like maybe 2 or 3 years before that. I'd always written songs. I played in a grunge band as a kid, 6, and we moved to London from Essex when I was 19, and then the band sort of fell apart, and from the moving down, I'd sort of learned how to promote a band aspect, and basically got club promotion. So I started running like indie clubs and putting on parties in pubs and stuff like that with the drummer from the band, and stopped releasing music or performing live as such, but was always writing. And then them songs that I wrote sort of turned into Beans and Toast. At the time I was living and kind of running, as a very loose word, a pub on Holloway Road called Nambuka. And I kind of started playing there more like when a band didn't show up, or I'd be the compere and stuff like that, and just to get the night going, I'd get my guitar out, and just, it sort of started from there, and it never really. And then also at the same time, I was going to a lot of festivals at the time, and kind of, you know, just breaking or blagging it in, and started getting, at the same time as that, I started playing sort of like open micy type stages at some of the bigger festivals. And then just the two things sort of both happened. Just one gig led to another, basically. I'd play one gig at a festival and get offered, you know, another gig at a different festival. And I just said yes to everything. And then I got offered, you know, I used to play in London like maybe 3 or 4 nights a week.
Really?
Old Queen's Head or Nambuka or fucking hell, other venues that names are escaping me now. I just had like the Abbey Tavern in Kentish Town. Just had loads of regular gigs with mates, and then at weekends I started getting more and more sort of festival shows coming. And it was just, I never really pushed it on anybody. At the time I was quite plugged into a wider circle. I was like managing quite a big indie band and running a big like club night. So it was all just a party, basically. And I was just like, just playing guitar and just jumping up when it was appropriate. And because I was so plugged into, you know, this kind of London live music scene, just got a lot of bookings. And I never asked for a gig, I don't think, for the first years. Yeah, I didn't ask anybody, you know, just sort of like, just said yes to everything that was offered. And then And then I did the Frank Turner tour. So Frank Turner used to play at Nambucca a lot. We were good pals, and he went off and came back. This kind of, like, things started exploding, and he took me on his first sort of headline tour. And then his manager and record label at the time, Extra Mile Recordings, Charlie, basically said, look, would you want to put an album out, because you're going on tour, and it's worth it just for that. At the time, I was just I hadn't recorded any music, and it wasn't really about that. And so I counted, and I had 49 songs. So I wrote another song, and then just recorded all 50 of them, and put out my first album. But specifically for that tour, really, that was the idea. It was to fund the tour, supporting Frank, and and then it just, a year later, it was like, fuck it, let's do another record, and then now it's 12 years later.
That's such an interesting path, because I know, like, obviously I'm up Liverpool way, so that London scene, was that still present? Obviously lockdowns kind of cancelled that, but has that London scene always been, like, throughout it? Like,
well, I'm saying nothing to do with it anymore, but in my, I'm nearly 40 years old now, this is I hope so, and I'm sure it is, but I can't really talk for the youth of today. But certainly back then, yeah, man. I mean, Nambucca was fucking. It was incredible musicians, like that went on to be superstars. That seeing them in the pub, it was, be it, Florence and the Machine, for example. I see her standing, singing solo, banging her foot on the stage and just singing a cappella. And I was just watching, and I was like, surely she deserves to be a fucking superstar. Listen to her, look at her, like, everything about it's just, and at the time, it was just like, seeing it happen makes me feel fucking amazing, because it's like, like, you can't be that good just in a small pub, banging your foot on stage, it was just mates, and it was just doing it. But I was like, this is good, like, and a lot of the bands from around that time, like, went on to be worldwide superstars, and it felt, because, and you kind of see, it's easy to say it now in hindsight, there was a lot of bands that I thought were amazing that perhaps didn't, but, like, it was, it was a wonderful thing to be part of in your 20s, fucking off your head, running club nights and watching incredible musicians and kind of like, and seeing it all go well. But it was definitely like being so plugged into that, not as a musician, but just as a mate, fucking helped me. That's really been the kind of key to me being able to do what I do. Even like Ben Lovett from Mumford & Sons recording my last album in the Church Studios for nothing, one of the best studios in London, because he's a mate and he recorded the first album, and it was like, now he's in a massive band. He's like, fuck it, sneak in, just come in when the band were recording, that Mumford were doing their album, and he was like, just come in on the weekend and we'll just make an album. It was like, and that's because of, hookups from back in the day. So it's still that kind of, the scene that was still lit is very much alive in what I do today, but I can't speak for, what the 20-year-olds are doing in North London.
That's such an interesting, like, perspective and things. And obviously I think time will afford you to look back on that and, make more distinctions, to be like, oh, that was when this kind of music and this kind of scene and all these people were being creative and being noticed for it. And that's, I think, something that's kind of not forgotten about, but kind of with all the grassroots venues battles, especially at the moment that happened, it's a lot that kind of gets missed out or ignored for where these bands come from. Because obviously with X Factor, Voice, or whatever, there's that avenue which is highlighted the most. But Florence and Machine was in pubs like way back when, and those pubs and those venues still need to be there for the next generation to come up through.
Yeah, of course, and I don't think, like that TV singing contest shit, anybody really, it doesn't really, no one gives a shit about that anymore, do they? Like, it's got people, I mean, it obviously serves a purpose, but people know now that it doesn't really have any integrity.
I think it's starting to seep through, and the cracks are starting to show a bit more as you kind of don't hear from anyone after they kind of win, or you don't even really hear like them winning.
Yeah, I never really pay any. I see stuff like that, like fucking, junk food and adverts. The less I know about it, the better I feel, basically. So try and stay well away. But I think as far as sort of like small venues, it's like, like bands exploding can do such amazing things for their either their towns or cities, or their venues, that they've come up through, which is just a reason to celebrate art. The fact that I'm trying to think of a good example, better than, obviously Sheffield's had a bunch of bands, but so Sheffield, for example, be it Pulp or the Arctic Monkeys or whatnot, over the years, from producing so much music, has given that city so much life and so much reason to create more music, and that's why the venues there are really good, and it's also why the city stands above a lot of the cities of a similar size around it, because it has more culture, more venues, more success. It's like, and that's because, I don't know, it's the chicken and eggs, isn't it? Did the band come before the, before the excited city, or the other way around? But let's hope that the venues can fucking survive, or because if you pull the plug on it all. Saying that, I'm so glad we're not talking about the pandemic. I must say, I feel like I've talked enough about that. It's nice to just sort of like step outside of it for a second.
Yeah, I've kind of been conscious about, like, this podcast started in March, and I recorded the first episode with Sean James on his last gig before like everything got pulled because of COVID, and we talked about it briefly on that, and I've had a bit of a chat, but I try and keep the COVID and pandemic talk to before I hit record, because I don't want this to become like a
that puts a time limit on it as well.
I don't want it to be like the Samuel Pepys fucking diary of like the Plague of London. I don't want it to be like a catalogue of the pandemic.
Plus, if anything it needs at the moment, it's probably less opinions on it, isn't it? So we'll stick to what we know a little bit more about, maybe.
Yeah, but it has been a conscious effort to not make this a doom and gloom conversation about musicians during this pandemic, because musicians are something to be celebrated, and even now people are going to be finding ways to create. And I think, if the worst happens and venues do close and things, no venues doesn't mean no musicians. It just means those musicians will find someone else to play.
I mean, music isn't going to stop being made or listened to, is it? Fuck. No. I mean, it's just an absolutely insane thought. And that's not, like putting down all of the many people it takes to put on a show and whatnot. But, it's still, of course it will survive, like in one way or another.
Like I did a gig, I think it was late last year, and I didn't even use a PA system, and it felt like it was the closest I've ever felt to feeling like an old like troubadour, like musician from way back when, because it was literally, I was leaning against the bar with my guitar and kind of wandering around the pub, because they were like, you can go play in that corner over there, there was like a stack of 8 chairs. It was next to the fireplace that had a fire guard on, so it was like a foot of space. I'm already 6'2" with a guitar and another guitar in case. And I was like, do you mind if I just wander around? And he went, no. And I was like, fuck it then. And with even just that one little experience, I know that if a venue or something can't have music, if I have to play on my street corner or my doorstep or someone else's doorstep, music's still going to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, anything I'm going to start talking about the pandemic now, which I just said I have not to. Yeah, of course it will survive. I'm not one of them people that believes that, it's like, in times of trouble, you get good music. It's like, fuck that. I'd much rather have, just only be able to write songs about, being on the beach watching the sunset, because the world is such a glorious place. There's plenty of other things to write about. But I think yeah, it's a tough time, but I also think that a lot of people have realised how much they need it as well. And I think as and when it is safe to come out, people will come out with a new first. I believe the same with nature as well. I think that something about locking people away is that they've sort of like realised how much they need, you know, nature, be it a park or a river or, you know, a coastline or whatever. But we've been denied a lot of our sort of like human instincts, and I think that when, you know, when we get them back, when it's safe to have them back, we'll take them with a new first, and hopefully that will be for the better. You know, maybe reclaim some of the places that's, you know, some of the nature that's been locked away from us, and maybe, you know, like make music more accessible.
Yeah, hopefully. And I think, you know, that's, you have to think positively and you have to think optimistically, and that's what I like about your music, and that's one of your influences on me, is to give, like, look at the world critically and speak like from your perspective, but always end on either a positive or end on a call for action or end on something that's not just and it's shit. And I think that's a really important.
Listen to that song. Why would you go back to the song unless it's like, this is my, you know, like a heartbreak song and this is my personal tragedy, and maybe you can tap into that. But like, it's, if it, you know, if the story of the song is you fucked, no one's really going to enjoy it, no matter how good the wordplay is or however good the chords might be. You know, like I mean, that's also not how I feel, but I think that, yeah, if you can do it, if you can pass anything off in a song, then it's got to be on a positive note, I'd say.
Yeah, I remember I've stopped watching a lot of like TV and things. Like, I remember everyone raves about Black Mirror, and I watched the first few seasons, and then it was just getting too bleak, and I was like, it's so well done.
Self-fulfilling prophecy at some point as well, isn't it? I mean, I love Black Mirror, so maybe that sort of takes back what I just said. But the thing is, I don't think I'd watch them twice. You know, I think for a song, you want a song that you can go back to.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was watching them and I was like, so they lose at the end, or this happens and then the world just carries on turning, which is like probably a more realistic, at least in this time. But it's like, it's not what I want to have as the message for like art and things. And I was like, even just thinking about other TV shows and all the kind of heroes or main characters weren't likable or good characters. So I was like, I just need to do something that's more positive, and that's been something I've really been trying to focus on.
Get on the rom-coms. I mean, there's not many Hollywood movies that don't end happy. But the few that, what's it, Requiem for a Dream? That is a film that starts sad and just gets sadder and sadder. And fuck, man. I mean, you watch it and it's just like, it's horrible. You know, it's an incredible piece of, you know, film, but it's, you know, devastating to watch. And I watched the new, there's another film that does a similar thing. But, you know, there's a reason that films have that little at the end to send you on your way, because otherwise, you know, like, what's the fucking point of just making everybody feel more miserable than it might be?
Yeah, and I think as a musician, you don't want to end a gig like that, because, you know, you don't want them walking out the door miserable.
Hard-earned money. I mean, sometimes, if anything, I feel guilty that if people have come to watch us play, and it's, you know, a lot of people look to music as a form of escape, you know, from the everyday or from the troubles of the world, and then they come to my gig and they get it all fucking thrown back in their face. I feel like, oh man, you know, like, well, shut up, man, just think about something nice. But you know, I suppose the sort of perfect gig, you come in and forget about everything, you know, and just sort of like, and just be fully entertained and leave on a massive high. And that's only going to do better for the world. You know, if you can bring 100 or, you know, 1,000 people into a room and them leave feeling better about themselves and the world, then fuck, that's a win. You know, they can only go on and you know, whether it lasts an hour or a lifetime, you know, it might sort of go on, and that good feeling, that goodwill can be sort of passed on.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely like a pay it forward thing. But with that in mind and the type of songs you write about, are you ever conscious or aware of, you know, there's always that divide between, you know, shut up and sing as a musician and keeping politics and worldviews out of it. And obviously you have a lot of social commentary songs, a lot of like not like critical songs, and you have songs that kind of highlight issues. Are you ever reticent about putting those type of songs out, or do you think that's, from your perspective,
it's what I do. Fuck, like, it's too late for that, you know. I think, and people that listen to my music, that's what they're expecting, you know. Like, no, you know, the more fucked up the world gets, the more I've got to write about, unfortunately.
Was that a hard one for core fan base and a perspective to have? Was that something difficult in the beginning, or was it with that festival and, you know, that kind of attitude, was that kind of embraced early on?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's what I've always done. So I think certainly maybe when I started off, there was a lot more kind of like songs about drugs. And, you know, and that was, you know, singing about getting hammered at a festival to a bunch of people hammered at a festival is, you know.
Yeah, it's a slam dunk.
Yeah, exactly. That works. But I mean, it's the only thing I know how to do. And it's what I've always done. And of course, I know there's people out there. I've always known it's not for everyone as well, you know. But I think, I don't know, the people that like it have sort of, I don't know, hang around, I guess. So I've never really seen it as some kind of like on a mission to build a fan base or anything like that. I don't take any of that into account when I'm writing.
It's just all. You need to get that message across, and that
it's all I know how to do. So I just do it the only way I know how. And I'd like to think it's got better the more I've done it, as you know, as it is with most things in life. But yeah, I'd never sort of question, you know, what's good. Like I said, that's what I do. It's not like, oh, you can't talk about this or you can't talk about that. If anything, it's like, fucking, you know, talk about it quickly. Talk about it.
No, that's the best way to be. And with, you know, Beans on Toast being the moniker and stuff, do you think as a solo act, and obviously you have band members come in with, like, I think, does Ten Sheds play drums with you? Piano, and he plays on your band, and you get musicians in. Has Beans on Toast been helpful as a name for, you know, playing in as a solo artist and stuff? Because I kind of think, you know, there's artists like the White Buffalo and Amigo the Devil and Beans on Toast that have this name that doesn't necessarily imply a solo act. So do you think that helped at all, like, early on, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the name's probably helped and hindered in equal measure. You know, I've had to explain it a lot more than I ever dreamed I would when I come up with it. I think initially I was probably the name for a band, and then I just started doing it solo before I sorted that out. And, you know, it can, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's a band, sometimes it's a duo. But I've sort of, with Adam, who books my shows, you know, like, that's, no one else gets to decide that, if you know what I mean. We book Beans on Toast and I can come and do whatever the fuck I want, is the general kind of, just because it changes, you know, to, without me knowing. You know, or not without me knowing, but, you know, I can't necessarily prepare for a gig by saying, oh, I'd never put full band in brackets or a duo show in brackets or anything like that. It's just, wherever it is, it's billed as Beans on Toast, and then, you know, like, you'll get whatever's the plan of that day. So I guess it's for that, you know, yeah. But again, yeah, never thought about that.
No. But I think that's something that's really interesting about you, is as an independent musician. You know, when I asked you to be on this podcast, I dropped you an email and you responded. Is there a bigger team, or is it just Adam who books your shows?
It's me and Adam, basically. He does all my bookings, which is, you know, the main kind of the work that needs to be done, basically. And I'm awful as much. I did get back to you, but I'm pretty bad at getting back to people, in all fairness. So he locks all that down, and then he also goes above and beyond the, you know, his role as a booking agent. We will schedule album plans together, and you know, we'll sort of bounce off each other for the works. But now I worked with Extra Mile label for like my first 8 albums, maybe even 9, first 9 albums. And then it was, you know, if you do anything 9 times, I'd like to think that you can do it by yourself. So there was no love lost there. It was just like, everything was in place, you know, it's like, I'm just going to, you know, do the next one by myself. And it was all like, yeah, good luck, high five. So there's certainly no love lost. But since then, you know, made it very, you know, cottage industry, basically. Like if you was to buy something from my website, my mum and dad send it out.
Yeah.
I got them on board. And then, you know, when we release an album, like, you know, my wife does a lot. She does the website and sets up all the store and stuff like that on there. And then when we release an album, or, you know, like the merch we're selling over lockdown, we just do it all here and fire it out. We've got good systems in place, but it's me and my family. It's probably the
that's such a good thing. And like, obviously I'm pretty new to this game. Do you, even from your perspective, is that a unique thing within, you know, the music industry and what you've seen? Is that a unique thing, or like a rare thing?
I mean, no, not really. I think a lot of artists will sort out their own merch up to a point. I mean, you know, most of the merch we do is sort of sign, and then it's just like, you know, and it's just, you know, I've never been afraid of work. To be honest, I worked in factories for a long time. So there's something about packaging and sending out merch. I was almost kind of trained for it. So yeah, you know, no, I don't think it's DIY, isn't it? You know, the old form. You know, who else is going to do it? Do it yourself. I mean, we'll definitely do it. You know, like, we got our shit together. It's not like, you know, a bunch of sort of kids sniffing glue, you know, CDs or anything like that. But it just, you know, it just, you know, it gives. I mean, it's not like there's people knocking trying to do it either. You know, not that I'd have them, but it's not like people are like, oh my God, we've got great plans. It's just, it just happened that way, and, you know, and it's just the way that it means that I can just keep on doing it. It's just more financially viable to do it ourselves, you know. It's like we have to do it, so we pay someone else to do it, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the thing. Obviously, it's like the cost and stuff, but I remember even from the first EP I released recently, or 2 years ago, and it was me and my girlfriend with like the stack of copies, and like I was signing them, she was folding them, and then we were posting them. And with like a new album and stuff, there's something really like humbling, and like with like, I've just had an album launch and I was getting all these orders ready. I had to take a minute to try and like recompose myself, because I was like, holy fuck, I get to do this. And obviously with you getting to share with your family, that must just be such a great moment to share in, as well as the music and stuff.
We're all fucking stressed. I'll try and remember that when I'm like moaning about it. Where the fuck, we're all going to go out late? And blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's a bit more, it's a bit more, I mean, it is nice, of course it is. But yeah, I mean, it can be pretty stressful. I mean, my wife deserves a lot more credit than she's getting as well. She's like almost devised secret ways of, she found a way of like secretly sneaking into the sort of the bloodstream of Royal Mail without ever going into a post office. We drive, I don't want to give away too many secrets to who's listening. We drive into a certain like delivery centre as if we're Royal Mail staff members, and she's worked out a way of tagging up all the bags and stuff. So we just kind of like throw them out into like the middle of the postal service, and then just get out of there. And they arrive so quickly. It's like, and I don't know how Lizzie created it, but it's kind of terrifying. But yeah, well, like I said, we have our systems in place, and it's just from doing it.
Yeah, from years of experience.
Yeah,
that's such Like, you're one of the people I've been really interested in talking to because it has been such a DIY ethos to it, but it's never been, you talked about this in a previous podcast, but you've never, not that you haven't wanted to climb or play the massive shows, but you've never wanted to exceed or like reach beyond like what you can actually have. And I think that plays to like a real strength of musicians and to yourself to show the longevity of your career and things.
Yeah, I'd certainly rather do it for a long time than, for a short time and have more, definitely. And I also think there's kind of like an unsung song about, it's something about being a musician or a performer where everybody around you presumes that you've got, the next show has to be bigger, like the next album has to sell more. There's no one kind of really selling the idea of being a musician and a songwriter for your whole life and, making as much money as you would if you, managed a bar, but you just get to do it forever. And it comes with all these other perks like travel and, the perks of being a musician and songwriter are endless, from the people that you meet to the places that you go, to the wild and wacky things that lay themselves in front of you. It's like the idea of just kind of like getting something right and letting it sort of plateau. I mean, again, it's the whole world is driven towards this thing where things have to be bigger, better, faster, stronger, blah, blah, and it's just, I've never really felt that. And I've always felt really, certainly in music, I've always felt really happy in my lot, basically. And and I'll definitely work harder to just to make sure it keeps happening. I mean, now I'm in a position where if people weren't buying my records or coming to my shows, I don't know what I would do. It'd be I can't even bear thinking about it. So it's a case of I don't need the next show to be bigger than the last. I just don't need to be smaller.
Yeah. No, I think what you just said there is something that, like you just said, it's not necessary, not even not advertised as a thing, but it's like to be able to be content and to make a living as a musician, especially in this day and age, is something that could possibly be attainable for a lot of people, if not if they lowered their standards, but they set their goals to a sustainable level.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we're wrapping up this podcast and I can't thank you enough, but you recently have you started doing some socially distanced gigs? Was it a festival? I saw on Facebook.
I've done a bunch. I've done a bunch. In the last 3 weeks, I've played in like a sort of beer garden or a sort of courtyard in outside a venue in Bristol called the Full Moon, which is a sort of venue I've been playing for years. A sheep farm in Bideford in Devon, a campsite in Sussex. All of them. The kind of the day that the law meant you could do gig, you could be with 6 people outside. That people like promoters and people around the country kind of got their heads going and created ways to do it. So the sheep farm, for example, had circles mowed in the ground that you could fit 6 people in, and it was 60 quid for a circle. So you come, and you went down and you stood in your circle and you went to the bar and bish bash bosh, and and that was one. The other one was the same thing: 6 people on a park bench in Bristol. 2 shows, like one in the afternoon, one in the evening. So it kind of worked out with getting more people around and doing enough tickets to make it work for everybody and stuff like that. And then campsite, which I've done a few these sort of campsite gigs where they're running at like 10-15% capacity, lots of space, loads of cleaning aspects, more sort of camping, but then people can sort of mini congregate on park benches and whatnot, play some songs to them. I think and there was like that the minute that the laws were relaxed and people started inventing these things, of like the bookings came in for me quite quickly, because I think ultimately people were trying to do something outside where they could sell booze and play music and people would sit down. And that's quite niche, but it fits me. like drinking music that you can sit down to. It's like, so within that niche, it was like, I got quite a lot. To be honest, I was like, fuck, game on. I thought it was going to be bookings every weekend until the winter came. But it was more like a lot of people just acted really fast. Like, I haven't got, as it stands, I haven't got anything else booked in the diary. I've got tours on standby waiting to see what happens. But yeah, I have been out, and I have to say, the more I've been out and the more I've been with strangers and in scenarios that I don't know, seeing people react, the more hopeful and sort of positive I feel that the way out of this pandemic is going to be fast. Fuck it. I'm probably naive. I've been naive for the whole thing. I've been pretty, always thinking like Glastonbury will go ahead, Boomtown will go ahead, and that. And now I'm like, everything's going to be fine. But still, like seeing human beings out there and actually just being out and seeing people just release, from the lockdown and whatnot, it's given me a great, feeling of hope.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. And obviously you've got tours planned for, like, it seems like everyone's just kind of like on the starting blocks of a race, just, rocking to like.
We've denied a lot of our, natural human instincts, and when we can have them back, we will. And we'll fucking love it.
And do you have anything? I know you've done a book and things. Is there anything on the horizon in that aspect, or is there any new music that you're going to be working on and releasing?
I got two out. Normally I release an album every December, but I'm releasing 2 albums this year. So I got the one album just about the pandemic, 5 songs which have been out and 5 which are unheard, that are all written and recorded just at home here. And then I've got another album which is got nothing to do with the pandemic, that would have come out anyway. And again, because we were saying about, short shelf life and whatnot, I think it's interesting to have a sort of capsule about how I felt about the pandemic. But at the same time, I don't want that just to be the album. So the other album, which I was always planning to sort of write and release, it will come out on my 40th birthday, and it's more of a kind of a sort of whimsical autobiographical album, like looking back. There's a song about my teacher from school, a song about like being 10 years old at a village disco, and songs about, my 20s in Camden and stuff like that. So I sort of, looking back, quite a personal record as well. So they'll both come out side by side.
Was that autobiographical one, was that harder to write, or was that something that was a cathartic experience for you? Like,
yeah, I actually wrote it. I wrote it before all this shit was going down. I did think I was going to expand on it, but I wrote it really quickly. I always find that I generally finish my records about now, initially about to, send these records into mixing and mastering and stuff. But they always find that finishing a record, the bit between finishing a record and releasing one is generally when I write a lot. Because it's the kind of limbo where you're not supposed to write then. You're supposed to be thinking about the new record. So I actually, I wrote most of the non-pandemic album and was intending to expand on that. I think it's going to be 9 or 10 tracks, but I probably would have been more like 15. But then when the pandemic hit, I didn't really feel like musically going down this sort of like, it just felt pointless to write songs about me being a teenager or whatever. It was like, fuck that. So I was sort of more concentrated on the sort of matters at hand. So generally and I think it's good to separate them. And there'll be musically, one of them's, like full band, big production, a record, and the other's just me whinging about 2020.
Well, I can't wait to hear both. I'm going to let you go because, we've hit the hour mark now, and, I can't thank you enough for your time. Like I said, I'm a huge fan. And
I'm glad we didn't just talk about the pandemic as well. I thought that was what I was going to do. So talk about songwriting away.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Hopefully I'll get to catch you if you're ever in Liverpool again. We'll get to sit down and do part 2 of this. But thanks so much, Jay.
Let's do it.
And there you have it, folks. That's episode 14 of Into the Van, Into the Bag. I wonder how many of you guys actually listen to this end part after the podcast and the interesting bit's gone, but if you've stuck around, I really appreciate that. Yeah, go listen to Rogue Radio, go listen to The Next Life, go listen to fucking Beans on Toast. He's such a fucking brilliant artist. I'm such a fan of his. And the music he creates is such, like I say in this podcast, he's one of the few folk singers or country singers or even musicians who truly, I think, embodies what a modern folk singer is by singing about what's happening around them as it happens. I think very few people do it as well as Beans. So go listen to his music. Go back and listen to episodes of Into the Van. Go listen to other podcasts that Beans has been on. Yeah, just keep supporting live music and podcasting and music and creative people. And, you know, just have fun with it as well, guys, for fuck's sake. If there's anything you need to be doing, it's to have fun. So, until next time, take care.